All right, let's continue to go over those properties of real numbers. Our next property is the multiplication property of 0. Now, this might seem kind of self-explanatory, but if we were to multiply anything times 0, like say 2 times 0, that would be 0, wouldn't it? Or if we were to multiply 0 times 2, that would also be 0. So the multiplication property of 0 says that the answer, when you multiply by 0, the answer is always 0. Okay. Now let's move on to some of our identities and those ideas. Now we have to think about, what does the word identity mean? And just think about in your everyday life. Your identity is kind of like who you are, right? It doesn't change depending on where you are. Meaning, it doesn't matter whether I wear jeans or if you wear, slacks. You are still the same exact person. Your identity doesn't change, even though maybe your appearance does. Well, in mathematics, the identity is a very similar idea. It's something that doesn't change. So we have actually two different identities in the basic arithmetic operations. We have one for addition and we have one for multiplication. So think about adding numbers. What is the only thing that you can add to a number and then that number will not change? Well, that would have to be 0, wouldn't it? 0 is the only number that you can add to any number you want, and that number will not change. For example, 5 plus 0 will always be 5. It doesn't matter what you add 0 to, that number will be the exact same thing. That's the identity. For multiplication, again, think about what would you multiply to something and it doesn't change the number at all. For multiplication, that would have to be a 1, right? Because if whatever I multiply times 1, say 5 times 1, that would equal 5. 1 is what you can multiply to a number, and that number stays the exact same. That says that 1 is the multiplicative identity, or sometimes it's said the identity under multiplication. You'll hear it both ways. Now we have to understand the idea of identities first, because the properties of inverses directly have to do with identities. An inverse is what you do to get an identity. So, for instance, we have, again, two properties, one for addition and one for multiplication. Let's think about addition. We're going to be adding two things together and getting the identity as the answer. Because remember, inverses are what you do to get the identity. So I want to add two things together and end up with the identity for addition, which is 0. Well, let's just pretend that we're adding 3 plus something to get 0. What would that something have to be? Well, it would have to be -3. So inverses for addition we also call opposites. And whenever we say opposites, we're meaning positive and negative. So +2, -2, those would be inverses for addition. For multiplication, we have the exact same idea. We're thinking about things that we multiply together to end up with the identity, which for multiplication is 1. So let's say that I were multiplying 9 times something to get 1. That something would have to be 1/9. So inverses for multiplication we call reciprocals.